Danny, I'm quite happy for Danny to chair it, Town Clerk.
I bet you are, Sid.
You're live on YouTube now. And I will be I'm recording the meeting now.
Zoom meeting window, content left panel window, gallery view, Alt+F, enter full screen, Alt+F, button.
So in the absence of the chairman and deputy chairman, the committee need to select someone to chair tonight's meeting.
Could I propose that Councillor Danny Brooks chairs the meeting, please?
And I'd like to second that.
Any other nominations?
There are none. So you just need to do all in favour and vote on that. That's a majority. I could say Councillor Danny Brooks is in the chair.
Thank you for your confidence, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll help you.
Okay, as I've been put in the chairman's position, then I will try and keep my eye on people's hands going up. We'll move on. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes of the last meeting. They are attached.
Chairman, this is to note the minutes of the meeting because they were approved by council on the 5th of August.
I take it that's Councillor Egginton, your hands up to propose that we accept them. Do we have a second?
We note the minutes.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Councillor Sid Dennis seconded it. So Councillor Dick Egginton and Councillor Sid Dennis proposed and seconded. All in favour, please shout.
That's a majority.
Yep, that's carried. Thank you very much. All lower your hands down now, please. Item 2 on the agenda, to note apologies received by the town clerk prior to the meeting.
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Anderson, Blackburn, Carpenter, Dannett, Empson, S. Kirk and Saxon.
Thank you very much. Item 3, to receive declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? If you find that you do halfway through the meeting or when you come to an item, please let us know. Do we have any declarations of interest for now? No? Excellent. Just remember, if you do come across one as we're moving through the meeting, please let us know. Item 4, resources report. Report attached.
And the report, as you say, is attached. It goes into quite a lot of detail, so I don't propose to go through it again in detail because I'd just be repeating what is in there. But I am more than happy to take any questions on any of the sections.
Thank you, Clerk. Do we have any questions on the staff resources report? I'm looking for hands up. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult than in a live meeting. Councillor Ty.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, I'd just like to know why you've put the cafe on no negative for 5 years, when we really do need to look at whether we are going to make any money from that cafe or not earlier rather than later? Thank you.
I don't think that's in this report at all.
Sorry.
This is about staff resources. I don't think it actually goes into any detail at all about the budget or income from the cafe.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
I think he's probably referring to 4.3. Would that be on this one? The cafe is largely self-sufficient in a day-to-day operation. There's still an administrative overhead, but yeah, I think what he's on about is the budget one rather than the administrative.
Yeah. I am, Councillor Dunn.
Okay. Any further? Would you like to lower your hand, Councillor Ty, so that I can check if anybody else is wanting to speak? Thank you. No, I think that's all. No one wants to go on that one, so I think we just note the report as a basis for future decision making. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Pete Barry and Councillor Jimmy Brooks proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. I think that's carried. Okay, that's that one. Item 5. We'll move on if you all lower your hand so that I can check for any fresh hands in the next item. Item 5, draft budget for 21-22. Report and budget attached.
Chairman, as the council's responsible finance officer, I'm required to prepare the first draft of the budget based on the best information that I have got available at the time and in accordance with good practice and other arrangements that the council may have in place, such as risk management. Over the coming 2 to 3 months, the committee and council will need to construct a budget that council will support at its January meeting, when there is a legal duty for council to set a budget and also to set the preset. I think it's possible to reach agreement before that meeting because trying to reach agreement under the pressure of having to do it on a night can lead to poor decision making. So I think getting all the issues, all of the discussions out of the way by mid-December, so that going into January I can present council's final position on that, and then council can enter that meeting knowing that all of the issues have been thrashed out and they can be confident that they can set that budget and preset without being under undue pressure. Before I go into the details and assumptions, I want to set the context. The reserves that I've shown in the budget figures were as at the 31st of March 2020, and it's probable by the end of this financial year, 31st of March 2021, that these will have fallen to a lower level. That's because we've had a drop in income from the expected level, and we've also had additional unexpected costs. So those reserves will be at a lower level than shown on the paper. Council has 3 basic measures to produce a balanced budget. Now, a balanced budget is one where income and expenditure match one another, but council can from time to time use reserves to offset unexpected one-off expenditure items. Clearly, it's an unsustainable position for council to continue to use reserves to finance regular routine expenditure, because eventually the the reserves will run out doing that. So those three measures that you've got are to increase the precept, to cut expenditure, or in some way identify a way of increasing income. You could change the approach to risk management and set your earmark reserves at a lower level. Now, what that does is to say, for items where you might have high areas of potential expenditure, unknown expenditure, so building land being typically the one that you might be willing to take a higher risk that you don't incur that expenditure going forward, and that would then allow you to reduce the level of reserve in that area. But clearly there is a risk in doing that, because if it occurs, then you haven't got enough money to pay for it. The next is to use some sort of combination. So those three measures, but you can use them in combination. Now, we haven't got to the future years as yet, and although they're shown on the spreadsheet, really haven't done any meaningful work on those, because there's a whole load of uncertainty, and at this early stage in the sort of budget setting process, we could easily spend time looking at future years only for things to change before the budget's set. So today's meeting is really focusing on that 2021-22 budget column. That's where it is. What I do is I'll go through in your report. I've gone through each of the main areas of expenditure, and I'll just go through and highlight those for the benefit of those that haven't got the reports in front of the public at home. So employee costs, we're predicting will be somewhat higher. That's partly due to the fact that our budget for this year is actually insufficient. If you recall, last year we changed the prediction on employee costs. In my original sheet, I put in that it would be a 3% increase. At the end of the process, that was reduced down to 2.5%. This was, trying to reduce the precept amount, and the increase, as agreed government level, has actually come in at 2.75%. So there is a bit of a difference between what we have in the budget and what we've actually going to spend. So that amount needs to be made up, and of course then the base budget from which it starts for next year has to be set at a higher level. So you've already got that inbuilt increase in there. So I've added a 3% increase for the future year. Now, it would have been really useful if the Chancellor had gone through his autumn statement as originally planned, but I understand that's now been kicked right into 2021, because normally he will give an indication on what public expenditure is likely to be like going forward and what the government's policies are. Now, last year there was a complete relaxation in those, and we saw public sector pay rising by slightly more than it has done previously. I don't know now whether or not, with the public purse being in the position it is, that may be taken back or reduced, so the level of increase might be smaller, or there may be a feeling that actually the government wants to pump money into the economy, and that is one of the ways in which, especially in light of if you've got more public employment, that often puts pressure on salaries because there aren't sufficient people in the right places to do the job. So that's when you get, you see with nurses, there's not sufficient to do the job. And so they then have to look at wages going up to try and encourage more people in. So I really don't know. It's a really very much, 3% is very much a guess at this stage. I've also included within that figure, within the employment figure, 20% of the cafe managers' employment costs, because of the work that's being done that isn't on the cafe. So there's some of the community engagement work that was in our business plan, plus also assisting with things like setting the hall out, locking up and doing some of that work at the weekend rather than bringing in another person to do that. So I've estimated it's about 20% of her time is now going on those sorts of activities that are not purely cafe, that they would still be there if the cafe wasn't there. So I've included those in those employment costs rather than in the cafe costs. There's also an increase in national insurance that I've put in of 1%. Now, this is an area where government, they are going to have to claw back some money from to pay for the expenditure that they've had on COVID. And national insurance is one of the areas where they can potentially do that without breaking the manifesto pledge. So employers' contribution. And similarly, I could see some impact on pension funds. Historically, pension funds have been good places for governments to go and raid and then require those paying into it to pay a bit more. So those two items have also been increased. But with the pension costs, we've got quite a number of staff who are on the cusp of auto enrolment and will, with any increase next year in pay, fall into the category for auto enrolment. So we have, even though they may not take the pensions up, they might decide not to take those up. We have to budget for them because they can. So quite a lot of difficult sort of inputs and outputs in this area to get the figure right. So this is our position at the moment. If government makes some announcements and more information comes out, we might be able to refine it a bit more to get to a clearer position. Moving on to supplies and services. Most of the items I've left as the same as the existing year, so I haven't inflated them. One area where we have is software support. We already know that some of that is planned to go up, but we've also had some additional software coming in during the current year, and there will be support for that going forward. So that's been increased to reflect that. As I say, overall, I haven't increased it by inflation. Moving on to professional fees, you'll see in there that that's down overall. We've taken money out because the NDP is coming to its end, so it's just a final amount in there to finish off the work. And the project management that we had previously in this year is falling out of the equation, and external audit fees are also reducing because in the last year where we were audited, we had the capital build, which pushed us into the the next level for audit fees, and we'll be returning back to the a lower level going forward. So those things have come out the budget. The things that I've put back in are legal fees, which we said at this time last year needed to be increased because we needed to have legal money to pay for legal fees, because we now have buildings and land and leases, etc. And subscriptions have increased as well. Both NALC and LAUC will be putting theirs up. We've got a figure for NALC. We haven't yet got the figure for LAUC, but I understand that's being decided fairly soon. So we'll get those. And we've also this year got the added things in there of the performance licenses and music licenses in relation to building for so that music can be played in the hall. Moving on to grants and donations, I've left those as they were. And then democratic and civic, election costs can come and go a little bit. This year, we know that or rather in the next financial year, we know we will have an election. So I've put an amount in for there. If that doesn't get spent, then that will be added to the earmark reserve, which is our saving towards the main elections every 4 years, which we also have to pay for. So the rest of democratic and civic I've left as was. Moving down to publicity and marketing, the Christmas illuminations. This year is the final year that it will be done under the existing contract. So we'll need to re-tender that next year. Now the costs have remained the same for 8 years. So I've put in for an increase there in order to retain the existing level of lighting in Lumley Road and the trees, because I feel that it's likely that costs will increase. Clearly that's can be up for debate as to what goes in there. And then moving on to the industrial units, left the rent has gone up in accordance with the leases by a small amount, and then we've put an additional amount in for water and electricity. Our whole electricity and water across a number of the sites is a bit higher than we'd hoped, and we're certainly looking into trying to secure the best overall deal. And it might be that eventually moving to one supplier may be able to help reduce that. Allotments, there's an amount in for additional commercial waste, which is basically getting rid of the rubbish that I've reported to you previously has been fly tips. Now, it may be that we get some money back from retained deposits if people leave, but that's more of a deterrent rather than likely to generate a lasting income. So as I say, that has become a problem. So it's extra money in the budget for us to be able to clear that. Small amounts of rubbish, you can sometimes ask the new allotment holder to clear if we give them some sort of rebate on their rental charge, which is only a small amount anyway. But where there's a lot of rubbish left on allotments, they won't be let unless they're cleared off. So moving down, sorry, moving down a bit further to Tower Gardens. and the both the park and the building. So left the income as it was. Now, Councillor Ty brought up the issue about Cafe Dansan. As I say, future years, as I said at the beginning, the future years we haven't really looked at. At the moment, I've set Cafe Dansan to be cost neutral. That is no cost, but no income, no contribution either, because of the uncertainty over COVID and what we're going to be allowed to do and when we're going to be allowed to do it. Community rent, again, you know, we would have probably hoped that that would have increased next year, but where we are, the limits on organisations being able to carry out their usual activities has meant that there isn't quite the interest that we had at pre-March. We did have a lot of interest pre-March, but unfortunately a lot of those organisations have either sort of closed down or suspended what they're doing, waiting for the pandemic to pass or a vaccine available. Then we have some issues, as I just mentioned, electricity. This relates mainly to the gardens, in fact, the increase there. When we took over Tower Gardens, we based our budget on the previous couple of years of bills that we were given by East Lindsey. What I suspect has happened is that we've had some of the electrical equipment repaired and is now working properly. And as a result of that, the electricity consumption is higher. I would predict that most of that probably comes from the pumps in the pond. They're on a three-phase supply, and they do consume quite a lot of electricity. We have taken to turning them off overnight, but we've also now got lamps that are working in our gardens, and they're on as they should be, but obviously consuming electricity. So it is a bit of a difficult one to predict, and we haven't yet, with the building, we haven't yet got a full year, so we don't know what the consumption will be properly. There were some costs coming over from the construction phase within the bills that we had, which we recharged, but it's, again, it's difficult to know what that winter period is going to be like. The ground repairs and maintenance has been increased overall. You will note, if you look back to your previous year's figures, that we've actually combined some of the items there. So that includes the ponds, it includes the £1,000 in the disability adaptations. So we've combined those together as much as anything, because we're getting a lot of headings now. There are some headings where we need to do a bit more analysis and have the extra detail, but we're somewhat confined by the accounting system that we have to how much detail we can get. So we're jiggling some of that around. But if you look back to that last year, you can add the columns up and you'll see that it comes to that amount. Many of these, where they're pluses, were actually predicted in the previous budget figures. So if we look at the whole of last year's budget for 21-22, it was actually 8%. It looked at an 8% increase across the whole budget. So that was already built in. So these costs here, where you're seeing an increase, it's reflecting the fact that that it would increase. So for instance, repairs to the building this current year we've got a lot of things under warranty, so we're not having to pay for anything. Next year, we'll have those coming in, and £7,000 worth of repairs and maintenance, for instance, covers things like valve testing. It includes boiler servicing, electrical testing. There's a whole heap of stuff done, and in fact, this is about £500 less than we predicted it would be last year. So, although it's increased from the current year, it's less than we anticipated it would be last year. The big area moving down on Scarborough Avenue car park is income. This year we've taken a big hit on car park income, because basically we collected nothing from the end of March until the beginning of July, and that covers what would have been, a big part of the season with several bank holidays in there, and we would have expected to have collected quite a lot of money during that period. Now, so that's left us with a hole in this year's budget, which comes out of reserves, but we need to be more prudent next year as well, because we don't know when, what the impact of lockdown going forward is going to be, and we don't want to be in a position where we overestimate the income again and find that we're having to take it from reserves yet again, because that will obviously put us in a worse position. So we need to find some way of making up that income. The other costs are broadly the same as they were this year, with the exception of I have put an amount in for a new car park machine. We've found that there's been a lot of breakdowns. That's involved a lot of staff time solving, trying to repair problems in-house, but then having to pay contractors to come and repair it as well. And during that period of time where the machine isn't working, it's meant a loss of income because the machine's been out of order. And that's going to be probably hundreds and hundreds of pounds that we've lost. So it may be that by investing in a new machine, that can be, but again, that needs to be discussed forward. The others are, as I say, the same as last year. Then moving on to public property and grounds. So this is everything else other than Tower Gardens. I had put some more money in for planting. We didn't do as much planting this year. And in fact, we grew, one of the members of staff actually grew some plants for the town council, which are still, they're in Tower Gardens at the moment. As I say, a lot of the items I've left the same. There's an extra item for tree work. That is a concern. Trees are a real concern. And that's one of the areas in terms of earmarked reserves, I feel that we need to keep a good level of reserve, because it's very, very unpredictable. This year we've had a number of trees which have caused problems. Now, some of those I'm still in discussion with East Lindsey District Council as to whether they are under their still under their watch in accordance with the agreement. But we do have other trees, and we've had trees in St Clement's Churchyard, at St Mary's Cemetery, as well as on Vine Walk and Coronation Walk, and in Tower Gardens as well. So there's a lot of issues there, and we're also having to carry out an annual tree survey, so that we identify any problems hopefully before they occur, and by doing that hopefully we can manage the problem rather than having to deal with the consequences of a fallen tree or a large limb. If you look at the resources paper I did, there's also been a lot of work in the office generated by complaints about trees that we're having to manage and deal with, and this is something that is fairly new for us because we've not had to deal with this volume before. Moving down, contingency public property. This is for effectively money that goes into the reserve, the earmarked reserve, to replace equipment such as vans and the big equipment that we have, and also to build up a reserve to pay for CCTV cameras in the town. We have 13 in the town, and there are now 3 in Tower Gardens, part of the East Lindsey estate. Whilst they're still managed by East Lindsey, the actual property is ours. Now, last time, as part of the new contract that was negotiated between East Lindsey and Borough Council, all of the CCTV cameras were replaced as part of that contract, so we didn't have to pay for that. And because it took them a long while to put them in, the 1-year warranty on them didn't start until very late on. In fact, almost we're in a second contract now for CCTV, but ultimately there will come a time when those cameras break or need to be renewed, and at that time the council would be responsible and have to make the decision either replacing them or not continuing with the service. But clearly, if you haven't got the money in the reserve, then you wouldn't be able to replace them. So hence that's why we put money away for those as well. Moving on to income, this year we've also seen quite a large decrease in the income from cemetery fees. Now, these have remained fairly buoyant and static over many years. So go back 10 years, and the trend, we've been able to predict what they would be within a few £100s from year to year. This year we've taken a significant dip. Now, that may be COVID related. It may be that because people aren't able to attend funerals, they choose to use the crematoria rather than having somebody buried. But our sale of graves has dropped. The amount of burials has dropped. Memorials have remained fairly static, which is why I haven't changed that figure. They tend to fall 2 or 3 or 4 years behind. It takes quite a while for people to put a memorial on a grave. So still dealing with ones which were from people who were buried years back. One in there which is a bit vulnerable is the churchyard service fee. Now, they pay us to cut the grass and do some work there. I'm not sure whether that's going to continue next year. I know that they're facing financial difficulties also. That may well drop out. So we'll have to have a look at that. Then moving on to general income, we've got income from the amenity grass cutting, which I've left static at the moment. It may be that we get a small inflationary increase in that, but Lincolnshire County Council don't make that decision until after we've set our budget, so we won't know. And interest received, that's with interest rates falling, we've reduced that amount even further. I mean, there is speculation that interest rate could go down to 0. Wait and see with that. And finally, on the last page, it shows a transfer into general reserves to keep the general reserve at a level that is sufficient to be above that sort of minimal level, because we've traditionally had really good risk management here. We've been and therefore we've got earmark reserves which cover those expenditures where we've identified those risks. Our general reserve we've been able to keep at a low level, but clearly we didn't plan for a global pandemic and the consequences that have come from that. So general reserves has taken a hit this year, and it does need, that general reserve does need to be rebuilt up. Now, another area that I've put money aside for here, which clearly council need to take a view in terms of their overall risk management, is a provision for bad debt. We've not had high levels of invoiced income before, so we've never had to have that provision in place. And I suspect if it hadn't have been for COVID, that this probably wouldn't have arisen this year either. But I think we need to acknowledge at least that there could be bad debt, which means that we again have to acknowledge that we may not get that in. So I've put that in as a bit like reserves, a contribution into that. By doing that, adding all of that up, that leaves us with having to need a precept if no reserves are used, 636,958, which would cost the Band D property. The majority of Skegness are bands A to C, but a Band D property would pay £111.30. For those watching outside, these are just provisional figures at this moment in time. Council won't make a decision until January. But that so that represents a band D. To get to a band C, B, or A band A is 67%. A band B is 77.7%, and a band C, sorry, a band B is 77%, and a band C is 88% of that figure. So that's how you arrive at the contributions for each of those properties. So that increase would be an increase of £24.20 pence a year, or 47 pence a week. So that's our starting budget. That's to keep services as they are now, and to contribute the money back into reserves to rebuild it following the use this year, as a result of the additional expenditure and the drop of income that we've seen here. And as I said earlier, the reserves there are the reserves at the beginning of the year, so they will be lower in quite a few. So the neighbourhood plan will be lower, the legal fees will be lower, the public property will be lower, the town gardens will be lower, so than is stated. And we won't know until the end, towards the end of the financial year, what our outturn is for this year, so that we can know exactly what the reserve is going to be going forward. Quite happy to take any questions on this, but of course, you know, this is This is my presentation of the position as it is, with not making any changes to services and not using reserves or anything else. And council needs to define or decide a way based on those different levers that it's got to achieve an outcome that it's happy with.
Thank you, Clerk. I'll take any questions on this, or Steve will take the questions. You'll have the answers. First up then is Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Even all right, I'll try and make head the tail of what I've read and what I can work out. If you can keep with me, just try and bear with me. Right, so basically what I've done, Steve, I've been through the budget supplied, and from what I see is that we knew we was taking, I know it's been an unusual year cost-wise and workload-wise, relating back to the resources report, but for me, we knew we was taking on the new building, we knew we were taking on new plots of land, and we knew what the workload was based on last year's budget. And last year's budget was set, when the preset was set, like you said previously, not too long ago, that we wanted to go to 8%, and we kept it at 4.75%. But the following years, still with everything we've taken on, we was going to reduce it right down to 3.5%. So the preset that's set at the moment, what you're recommending of 27%, seems incredibly high in relation to what we'd already planned for going back. And I know your figures on the budget, actually, most of them stay the same, but the only one that seems to have a large increase, and for me, it seems a big chunk, is the wages over the next 4 years are going up £34,000. For me, that's a lot of money based on the staff we have. So I think that's a big chunk of it. That I know it's only creeping up this year, but if it creeps up that much, what else will come in the way? Along with that, I just feel like the reserves, I mean, I don't know how much of the reserves we've used over the last few years, but like you said, there are people not booking graves, and maybe you're going down the crematorium route. I know you don't want to use the reserves, but there's £60,000 there straight away that we could probably use, knowing full well we've probably got 15, 20 years worth of burials down there. And if it is reducing, then surely that big chunk of money, rather than penalise our residents within the preset going up that much, we could use a chunk of that and over time replace that, giving us a big window of opportunity to replace or replenish some of it, if not all of it, if not needed. So that's pretty much where I am with what I see. So I just think from the forecast of last year's preset needed of being 537,000 to this year of being 636,000. That's a difference in 12 months with everything that we knew we was taking on of £100,000 more needed in the preset. And I just feel that's a hell of a lot of money that somebody somewhere has got to find when it's not needed because we've already got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the clerk so far, first off. I have sent him a list of questions already, which he's got back to me with. But could I just ask, is there supposed to be a heading in row 138, please? Because I can't see it on my copy in cell A of 138. And yeah, I mean, we're obviously looking at putting some money into the reserves. What's planned on this budget? It's a hell of a lot of money for the council taxpayers to find in these uncertain times. People haven't got the money. People are losing their jobs. People are being laid off, not getting as many hours as they used to. We can't afford for them to be paying this sort of bill. Could we relook at this budget without transferring the money that the clerk has just recently said about? But he's already got some money allocated to go into reserves. For this year especially, do we need to put that money into reserves, or can we save the council? Because they can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just ask you to remove your hands, lower your hands once you've spoke. Councillor Finlay, that's you I'm talking to. Thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions really. The first one is the car user allowance mileage. Is that like a salary payment or something? Because that, considering there's been COVID, that's not changed at all, which is a bit strange really, because I thought there'd been less mileages in the cars and that sort of thing. But obviously, if it's a salary type payment, then it's not going to change at all, obviously. Also, have you got a figure for the Scarborough Avenue car park, what total income to date is at all? You've also got a car park utility down at £800. I wonder what that's for. My next question is the replacement car parking meter at 4,000. Did East Lindsey know that there was a problem with this meter? And is there any way we could ask them to chip in if we are going to get a new meter, if they knew that there was issues with it over the previous years? Also, the ransom mower lease, which is fine. I think we debated that a long time ago, which we went for the lease. Well, then you've also got a property team vehicle and ride-on mower at 10,500 a year. Is that a lease, or is that just payments for repairing the vehicles and that sort of equipment? And also, I'm on the same page with the other councillors. 27%, no chance. I'd want to be looking more like 5%. So we're going to have to try and figure something out. Thank you.
Chairman, it might be useful because I'm going to be struggling to keep a record of all of the different questions that are coming through, because they're going through at a rate of knots, and trying to keep on top of them. It might be worth.
I was thinking the same, Steve. I'm writing them down here myself, and I thought it's going to struggle with these. So if you want to answer a few now, then we'll bring the speakers in as we get through them.
Well, going back to Councillor Finley's figures, if you go back to last year's, the council were predicted, the figures that went by council for 21-2, so the year that we're now looking at, represented an 8% increase on this year's budget. So council already had built in an 8% increase in the precept for this year to cover the expenditure that it knew was coming along. So that 8% was all effectively already in that base budget of known costs. Now, the reason that was higher was because council decided to take a sort of to reduce, if you like, the figure into 4.75 the previous year, which means that there's a bigger gap. It didn't reduce the actual expenditure in the following years. It just took less income in 2021, but that means that the gap between this year and next year is bigger. Now, if answering sort of a general query about expenditure and use of reserves, yes, of course you could use any of the reserves you like to offset an increase this year, but next year, unless you do something to the actual figures themselves, the expenditure and the income, then all you're doing is putting off this year's moment to next year, except it will be inflated further. So instead of needing a 27% increase, you'll need a 30 or 35% increase. And you're compounding the problem by putting off the decision. You're kicking it down the road and you're not getting rid of it. Now, some of this year's increase, and certainly the contributions into reserves, are because we've lost a lot of income. So picking up on Councillor Jimmy Brooks's question about income, so far this year, we've had about £10,000 worth of income from the car park. So we are well down on where it should be, because the income from the car park now until through till next March is going to be much lower than it would have been from March until July, which is the period we've lost. So that money's gone. It's gone out of the budget. It's gone out effectively out of reserves. So you've got the choice not putting it back in, but then if the same thing happens next year, there's even less money there to cover it. And if we start to get other things happening, then you're taking a higher risk position, which is, you know, you may choose to do that, but we do get to a position where, with the general reserve in particular, that if you don't have a reasonable amount of money in that general reserve, if anything happens, if payments come in late, or, you know, we then start to get into the problem of, have we got enough money to pay the bills? Now, realistically, because we've got the money in earmark reserves, you would transfer the money out of those into the general reserve in that emergency situation. But then you've got the problem that if, for example, if there was a major issue with trees, or if you needed a vehicle replacement, or if you needed to carry out some major repairs to paths, or if you had to do a dike clearance, or, you know, all of these things that you've got land now which you have to do things to, if all of those cropped up at the same time, you wouldn't have enough money potentially to do it. So the more you take out of reserves, the more risk you've got that you won't be able to complete a service or do something that you might not only want to do, but you might legally have to do. So it's all about, the reserves are all about risk management on that basis. Picking up on the car allowance, some of that is salary paid. Some of it relates to the grounds team, because they do work outside of their normal routine. Some of them you have to use, you know, the other vehicles. We've got 3 vehicles. We've got many more than that traveling around. Sometimes they have to use their own vehicle to get somewhere or to take things somewhere. And on those cases, they get paid an allowance for doing that. So things, it might be play park inspection visits, it could be maintenance jobs, where it's not possible to take, where there isn't the capacity within the vehicles we've got. I mean, essentially, if we've got enough seat spaces in our vehicle for our team, but they can't all be in the same place, all be in different places at the same time. So we have to manage our workload so that we're taking people to some places while other people are going to other places, and that means that they're using their own vehicles to do that, which is more cost-effective way than buying lots and lots of vehicles to enable us to do that. Picking up on Councillor Cunnington's, Councillor Cunnington has the advantage of seeing the sale references on the spreadsheet, because he's looking at it in a different way. Cell 138 is just a total figure, so it's totaling up the cell above it. So there shouldn't, you know, there isn't an item that is just a total of the line above. What we're talking about there. Now, I think I've picked up the reserves, the issue with reserves that Councillor Cunnington raised as well, so I think that's been raised a couple of times. I think going back to Councillor Finlay and the going forward, that there is a difference, and again it's this compound difference, because if we lose something in this year, that's lowered our position. So we haven't got that this year, so we've got to make that up. And if we don't get it next year, then we've got to make it up again. So it's like double. Similarly with the expenditure, if we've got higher expenditure this year, which we hadn't planned for, we've got to make that up, and we've got the higher expenditure next year. So it's almost like double the amount. So that's why the increase seemed bigger than it would have been. I think there was one other question, I think again from Councillor Brooks, which is about the car park machine. I don't know whether East Lindsey had any knowledge that it was a dodgy machine. And I doubt that we'll find that information out, and I cannot imagine that they'd be willing to do anything towards it, based on discussions around other things. We are where we are. Council can take a view on it, but we don't want to spend that money, and we'll take the risk. Hopefully, we've had some repairs done this year. The team know a bit about the machines now and how they work. We can take that risk and not do it. Eventually, it's going to break down, and we're going to need to replace it. But that's one of the things you could say, well, we'll defer that for a year further. These are the sort of like detailed decisions that you can take to try and fine-tune the budget.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to the next councillor? That's Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there's just a few things. Mainly, first off, about the putting money back into the general reserve. We are still in the pandemic. This is the rainy day that we've been saving for, and this isn't the time to start saving for another rainy day. It's still raining. And another thing I'd quickly just like to bring up is the money in the civic events, which is £2,400, which we haven't had any this year. So where is that money, and what, just a little bit about that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, over to you.
The civic event we haven't spent this year. That's an unspent item, because that would have been the mayor's the mayoral reception, and hasn't occurred. So that's one of the pluses that's gone back into general reserve at the end of the year. So as I said at the beginning, until we get a bit further through the year, we won't know quite what that position is going to be. So there will be, I'm sure there will be other items that we haven't yet paid for that we're expecting. We've got a budget amount, and until we actually get the bill, and a lot of it's new this year, certainly for the land, anything on the land, we're still in the first year. For Tower Gardens, we're only in the second year, and there are things there where we still are not completely au fait with. The building, we're in our first year. So there are bills there where we don't know the actual cost. I mean, a big one is business rates. We haven't been valued yet. I've been pressing and pressing and pressing to get the business rates valued. We haven't yet got the bill for that. So I don't know how much that's going to be. So there's a risk there. We could have, it's more than we thought, which puts us in a worse position, or it could be, well, actually, it's not as bad as we thought, and we've got a bonus. So at the end of the year, position might not be as bad. We don't know until we get that bill through. That's why this budget setting process is a refinement process. So at this stage, it's about looking at the figures and seeing the levels of service that you want to deliver. And then we can take a view on those reserves at the end of the year. I mean, picking up on the rainy day, the problem with the general reserves is it covers any unplanned risk. That's what it's for. All of the other reserves are either to save for something, so you might save for a replacement piece of equipment, or you put some money in because you know there's some bad things that could happen, trees falling down, and they cost a heck of a lot to deal with. So you put some money in reserves in case you need it. but you only use that money when it's actually needed. So that's what the earmark reserves are for. The general reserve is there are some risks that we simply don't know about, and that's what the general reserve is for. But the problem is that those risks continue. So if you use a big chunk of your general reserve, which for some years now I've been saying is at the low end, and we've allowed ourselves to have it at the low end because we've got good risk management in place, but that doesn't give us a lot of flexibility. So yes, I understand what you're saying, that we're still in the taking out of the reserve phase, but we can't let it drop too low, otherwise we might get hit with something else that we don't expect, and then there's no money there.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Councillor Dick Edgington, please.
Yes, thank you. One of the things that became apparent to me over the years is that in this country we have like two parallel economic forces. We have the private sector and we have the public sector. And the difference is quite stark with the pandemic. We've got hundreds of thousands of jobs that are in jeopardy because companies, due to the government having to take action to try and contain this virus, more or less overnight have lost their income, and there's no way they can deal with it. In this report that the clerk has presented to us, as usual, a very fulsome report, he has alluded to the fact, quite properly, that we've had a drop in income, and that's been highlighted. But we still don't seem to be, in a sense, adjusting for that loss of income. I mean, this might not be a bit of an unpopular thing to say, but in the public sector, you get wages agreed year on year on year. When I worked in the private sector, if the company had a bad trading session, you didn't get a pay rise. You had to forego it in order to protect the integrity of your employer, because it was as simple as that. Because you was obviously, your expenditure was getting dangerously high related to your income. And I just feel that, how can I put it, a little bit of private sector realism really ought to be brought to bear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edgington.
Do you want me to answer that, Chairman?
Yeah,
I'll answer the part which is many of our workers are just above the minimum wage, and those and one of the reasons that future budgets showed an increase was because the government had in plan to increase the minimum wage quite considerably. And if you recall from the discussions over the last couple of years, and these were predicted in the sense that as that minimum wage goes up, then that puts pressure on the bottom of the local government pay scale. So, our grounds team, the people a lot of people working for us are actually only just above the minimum wage, and therefore any change in the government's plans for minimum wage will have an impact on our salary bill. So that is one of the reasons that when you look to future years, you see it increasing, because we have planned, pre-planned that increase in. Now, I don't know under the current circumstances whether the government will stick to their plans to increase the minimum wage as previously thought. It may be they don't, in which case, and as I said earlier, we haven't had guidance from the Chancellor in terms of public sector expenditure and control. So once we have that, we would understand what the likely impact on the employment costs would be.
Thank you, Clerk. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Yeah, thank you for letting me come back at this, Chair. I've missed a couple of things last time. With regards to our community grants, obviously, myself being a district councillor, we all get X amount of money at present. We don't know what's going to happen next year until we get there. But I would like to see, as a town council, you've got the residents which are looking to pay the council tax, looking to pay the bills. And yes, we're giving it to support charities and things. But I think to help us as town councillors, I'm more than willing for any grants that are asked for from the town. They could approach me by all means to use a district grant first to see that through. I would propose that we actually try to reduce that figure somehow a little bit, even if it's only by £2,000 or even £1,000. Every little helps our council taxpayer. That's first thing. Secondly, the lights. The clerk said that we're under renewal of contract next year for the Christmas lights. I know it's a big ask, and there's probably more work involved for the staff, and we're looking at how we can reduce staff loads. But there's a lot of big companies out there still with money for sponsorship, advertising, things like that. Could we get somebody to start looking to see if we can get some support from some of the big companies in the town to try to help sponsorship? £18,000. So if you've got 18 companies at £1,000 each, that pays a whole lot. If we've got 18 at £500 each, it reduces that bill. So if we could try and look at getting a bit of sponsorship from some of the bigger companies in the town, and there are some that are still being very well looked after, still working well, and they've got budgets for things like that. And thirdly and finally, the cafe. Earlier on in the meeting, the clerk said that the cafe was cost neutral at present. Could I just find out from the clerk if the cafe staff wages are in the wage bill? Because if it's cost neutral, really, they shouldn't be going into that wage bill, I wouldn't have thought. Or if so, it needs working out somehow so it's not in there, because otherwise it's not cost neutral. The cafe being cost neutral means that the council taxpayer isn't paying for the cafe. So why is it in the wage bill? Thank you.
Right, in response to the last question first, no, the cafe staff aren't in the salary bill. Apart from, as I said at the beginning in my report, I proposed 20% of the cafe managers be in there because she's doing work that relates to other council services, effectively supporting community support and community engagement, which was part of our business plan. Hers is included within that 20%. In relation to sponsorship, sorry, it's not. It's a my throat. Sponsorship. Well, when East Lindsey District Council decided not to have lights on the front, they did a whole exercise on this. I sat in most of the meetings. There was a lot of people from the town. I'm not sure if Councillor Ty remembers. I think he may have been part of it at the time. The bottom line was that most companies, in order to sponsor something, want to have an advertisement on the lighting. As soon as you do that, you're then into planning permission and other things which make it quite difficult. You also have got the issue of, what happens when their light goes out, and there's a whole heap of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of that make that suggestion less palatable. And as I say, there was a big exercise looking at that. Actually, at the end of the day, there were very few businesses who wanted to do something unless it was, benefiting them in a big way. I mean, that might have changed, but just the administration around managing the expectations of the sponsors and dealing with the knock-on effect of, as I say, of advertising, makes the whole process quite difficult.
Okay.
Okay, can I just come back at that?
Yeah.
Well, in that case then, and obviously I'm not in business myself, but I do know the businesses in the town pay into the bid. And this is to improve business. The lights are there to bring people into the town. Bringing people into the town means they're going to spend the money. Could we not approach a bid to try and help out with some of that cost, please?
Steve?
I mean, we can ask, but it's not, we can ask the board whether they would contribute towards my recollection from when East Lindsey, when they very first started, when East Lindsey decided not to proceed, was not to, but I don't know in relation to a request from the town council.
I think when I was on the bid board, it was they would have to do lights the whole coast because the bid is not just for Skegness. That was my understanding of it. Councillor Ty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just for the information, well, when the illuminations were finished, that contract was up. The problem we had was the costings. Now, I inquired about 3 sets that we wanted to do, 2 for businesses and 1 for Rotary. The Rotary one would have cost in the region of £6,000 for the year. And also, I know my good friend Keith on the foreshore, he was looking at one, and these costings was far more. The problem was that as a business, you wanted to put your name on, and once you put your name on, it altered the prices. East Lindsey didn't want you to put your name on them without you put it in a little block in the corner. So it just wasn't feasible for people to do that. But I do believe that the bid are looking at doing something with the illuminations, as my good friend Councillor Dennis will tell us.
Thank you. Have you got a reply for that, Steve, or shall we move on?
I haven't got any further information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back quickly about Councillor Cunnington mentioned about the community grants and saying how it might be a good idea to reduce it. I think to reduce that in a time where people are going to be using, the places where this money goes to more than ever, I wouldn't be very happy to see that community grants reduced at all. I think they're going to need every penny they can get. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sid Dennis.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
It's been a bit depressing sitting here, to be honest, this evening, and I think we should look at the positives of this, and there are some positives. First of all, I'd like to know what it's going to actually cost per household per year, what we want to do with this price. I don't want to spin it with mega percentages. I want to know what the physical costs. And if you're telling me the physical cost of something is £24 per household per year, less than 50 pence extra, I don't think that that's going to send anybody to a food bank. I know things are very tight, and I know there will be vulnerable people out there without employment, but I'm sure that they will get help off the state. I've looked at this, and I've had a ring round to different people in the constituency and asked them their opinion. And the basic opinion was that people would be quite happy to pay £1 extra as long as they got the services. And bear in mind, that's what we do as a council. We're talking about nitpicking about grants. That's not possible because the ELDC grant is not for doing that. So we can't do that. We have served people well here. Look what we've taken on. We've taken on the new building. We've taken on all the grass cutting with all the staff. We've taken on the car parks. You know, we bought that lot for £1. I think it's a bit cheeky to go back to East Lindsey District Council and ask them to put a £4,000 machine in when we bought something for £1. Ludicrous, because we're taking a ton of money. We're taking, you know, we've lost £10,000. Doesn't take long for £4,000 to go in wages. Them girls who have got plenty to do, having to count money out, and it doesn't work. And but that's all. That is just nitpicking. What we need, what we are as a council, is we've got to give these people the resources to do a job. There must be, as the town clerk said, we're very low on reserves at the moment. We've got to be very careful. There could be a 53 flood in the middle of next winter, you know, and that would be a flood. Now, I had 63 people work for me, 53 are furloughed. They're all back. They're all working. At some stage, all of us are going to pay. All of us are going to pay. I run the HWRC sites tied into a contract of 3% a year. Well, we've gone up 8%. Nothing to do with me. That's government doing this and government giving this wage. And then when you put the minimum wage up, the guys who are above the minimum wage want the same amount. And it catapults out the way. I think what we've got to try and do is show some vision. And I'd like some costings, because we've got until January. We're not going to make. I'd just like to change our ethos of the way we're looking at it. Not what it's going to cost, and we can't possibly give 27%, 97%, 43 million%, because that's rubbish. What we need to do, we need actual figures, and how that figure stacks up. And if it's 40 pence per household per week, and you went out to the people in our wards and said, look, we do this, we do that, are you happy with that? I don't think they'd be unhappy with that, because I think it's excellent value for money. You know, there's Steve, there's Kate, there's Sue and there's Sam. It used to be in that little poxy office in the town hall, sitting there like pithy on a log in that horrible building. Used to be sat there. Now they've got all this work to do. They've got the ground staff, they've got the new building, they've got the cafe, they've got bookings coming in, they've got people coming in. The cafe, I don't think, when you look at the cafe, we're actually allowed to make money. It's a community hub. And therefore, it just wants to wash its face. If there is any big money, I'd be interested in Stephen's spin on that. But I'm led to believe that, you know, we can't run it as a business, because that's not what we do. That's not in our remit. And I do think as a council, we should look at our achievements, all us guys here. You know, we've built the new building. We've got the town, we've got the Tower Gardens, the town garden. I was talking to one of the kiosk holders, Dave Charles. He said, it's marvellous what we've done with the Tower Gardens. It's marvellous what you've done with the grass cutting and made the offer. We can't afford to come to a stage where we can't fund those things, because the whole ethos of tourism and the way we bring people to Skegness is what funds everything. You know, I know some of the ratepayers will say, well, it doesn't do me any good, I live down Beacon Way, you know, whatever. But the whole town that we run, you know, we need to give these people some inspiration and not nitpick at what this wage is and that, and how much is that lawnmower going to cost, and the bike wheel got a puncture last week. That's not our business. We're here as councillors to give our staff vision and give our, especially in this day and age, we're in a very strange position. You know, nobody can go anywhere. You know, and you know, I've got this kidney from my wife, and I feel like putting a bit of lipstick on. You know, it's a bit weird, isn't it? But anyway, I thought the thing is, we need to inspire people, and let's get some proper costings, and then the next meeting we can come back with physical monies to see what this is going to cost us. Not percentages, and we're not going to pay that, and we can't ask the ratepayer to pay that. Well, I think if we get a figure, I think we councillors go out in our wards and ask people what they think. Ask people if they're happy. And if they're not happy, then we'll get some idea. But to me, I believe that we are good value for money, and we've done great with this town in the last 10 years. We've really moved it on. We are in charge now, and let's not make a hash on it by nitpicking it through it. You know, let's give people inspiration, and let's move it forward as a town. Move our town forward. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
I'll just, the problem we've got, Councillor Dennis, is if you go to your constituents and say, oh, we're going to charge £24, 27 pence extra a year, they assume that is the whole council tax bill. And unfortunately, it is not. If you went and told them how much the whole council tax bill is going to go up, they would say you are ripping them off. That's just what my point of view on there. I also remember when we was looking at taking on the extra stuff, we was telling our residents that we wouldn't be putting the council tax up by 20 and 30%. It would be cost neutral. We would be keeping it down at the 4 and 5%. All of a sudden, it's now 27%. We can do and build whatever we want if we can start putting our council taxes up by 30%, same as East Lindsey can. That's why the government have capped them, because they don't want them putting them up that long, because they wouldn't be in power for long. I don't think our residents, if you go with the full council tax bill, not just our bit of it, the full bill, because that's what they'll be looking at, I don't think they will be happy this year. I can guarantee that. I've already spoke to people that aren't happy now when I said the council taxes, our bit's going up 27%. They said, what, the council tax going up 27%? I said, no, just our bit. Well, how much is the rest going up? So I think we've got to be careful. You've just told me that there's one of the kiosk holders on the Tower Gardens front there that's as happy as Larry, and I know he is, as are they all, yet we're putting £10,000 to one side for bad debts. If somebody's not paying the rent, out they go. I could put 6 people in front of you tomorrow that would take any one of those kiosks on and pay off the rent that you are owed. So, you know, there is nitpicking, but bad debts on them 4 kiosks, I don't think so. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I just picked up on there from Councillor Dennis is he talks about inspiring people and this and that. That is great, but at the end of the day, for some people, this is going to be a question of whether they can afford to eat that night. I think we do need to be nitpicking this, because this is people's lives at the end of the day.
Okay, do we have any more speakers? Anybody else wanting to speak? Councillor Sid Dennis.
Councillor Dennis, you're still muted.
I needed to be. I was using a bit of bad language, so it's probably good. Yeah, we're not talking about that, Danny. We're talking about what we as a council, not the rest of it. We're talking about what we as a council are charging. Skegness Town Council, not East Lindsey, not county, us, what we're charging. I need to know what figures we're charging.
That's correct.
And to be fair, Billy, to be fair, Billy, I'm not finished yet. To be fair, Billy, you know, nobody from what bit we're paying, nobody's going to absolutely die of starving hunger what we're doing. And those people that are in that bad, it will be in that bracket that gets caught up. We have still got to. I'm sorry, I disagree with you totally. I think you wouldn't put it up last year. We had a recorded vote on it, and now it's biting you back. And if you kick it down the road again, it'll bite you back. And in 3 or 4 years' time, we're going to be in the mire, big in the mire, because we won't have enough money to pay our bills. We'll go bankrupt. You need to get a grip of yourselves, and we need to bite the bullet, because the cost hasn't even started yet. The cost hasn't even started yet, because all these billions of pounds, you know, we only finished up paying for the Second World War 5 years ago. But you'll do what you need to do. But you flabbergast me, you really do. It's just like, I beggar's belief, really.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. So do you think we need a bad debt fund for those 4 kiosks? That's the first question. I don't
know. I would think not, Danny. I would think absolutely not. But I don't know the situation. All I know is what I see. I don't know what the town clerk would probably give us a better idea. But you've got to be very careful with confidentiality in the way things are. But yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. Not for 1 minute.
No. Do you want to come back in?
Chairman, can I just respond on that?
Yeah.
A provision for bad debt is there in case we don't get the income that we expect to get. Now, even if action is taken against those that owe us money, it doesn't mean that we would get that money in, and therefore a provision is needed. It may be that then, following that, something happens and you have a contract with somebody else, and they then are forming part of, but you still lost the money that you were expecting. And actually, in the current times, who can know exactly what businesses are going to be secure going forward? And it could be that even a new person taking on that contract may well be in a position where they're unable to fulfill the terms of that, and that then results in a bad debt. It is a difficult situation. Again, council doesn't have to put that in. That is been put. I've put that forward in recognition of the position that with COVID that is currently in place. We don't know what next year and what the trade in next year is going to be, and therefore, as a responsible finance officer, that's what I'm putting forward to you. Council are quite at liberty to say, no, we're happy to take the risk, remove it.
Councillor Dick Edgington.
Just bear with me. Yes, thank you. Councillor Dennis very forthrightly put his point of view on this, and if I understand him correctly, he said that the percentages tend to, in a sense, almost muddy the waters. So perhaps, you know, if I'm wrong, but no doubt he'll correct me, that what we would really like is some figures whereby that any proposals, use this as a template, this is what it would cost for Band A, Band B and Band C, bearing in mind that the benchmark is Band D. Because if someone says, okay, it's going to be 35 pence a week or 50 pence a week, whatever, in most people's cases, that might have a better perception of what the actual cost is rather than a percentage, because quite clearly we've agreed that, this is in very challenging times, there's no doubt about that. And we need to sort of like come to some agreement on this. We're not, we're just supposed to be agreeing on this draft budget, but there's a long way to go. So that's, I don't know whether Councillor Dennis thinks my comments have any merit, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, I think generally for me, like I get totally what Councillor Dennis is saying, 100%. The town council needs money to run. We can't run a council and give the services without money in the pot, and I totally get that. But for me, like Councillor Dennis says, we've got to get a grip, right, and get more money in the pot. Great idea, but maybe it's a little bit high on the percentage, like Councillor Edgington just said. That doesn't necessarily reflect the amount of money we're asking for in a percentage. The figures is what matters. But in previous councils, how many years back have we kept it at 4.75%, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and still managed to sustain the services within the town? Yes, we have got more responsibility now with more blocks of land, obviously the new building, more staff. So yeah, a little bit more. But I think when you look at, like Councillor Brooks says, when you look at 27% from a year after year after year under previous councils of 4.75% and sustain a working council, why can we not at the very least have a small percentage? Yes, Councillor Dennis, it won't give us as much money as what we need, and probably the people will realise that we need to keep it to an absolute minimum to sustain a working council, but not cripple the people that's just gone through a global pandemic with losing jobs, losing businesses and everything else. So for me personally, I think, yes, we do need a little bit more, but that percentage is terrifying people. And if East Lindsey and Lincolnshire County Council and everybody else, our small percentage goes on top of theirs, it's a terrifying amount what people are going to be paying annually. Thank you.
Councillor Dankirk.
Thank you, Chairman. I trust Councillor D. Brooks when he refers to how valued those kiosks are. So specifically in mention of this bad debt fund, I agree with the clerk that there needs to be something in place because there are legal fees that we will have to pay if we're turfing these guys out for whatever reason. But I am confident that that lease can be sold in a position which we could make that money back. So whilst I 100% agree we do need to have some sort of budget, I also think there's a potential income as a consequence of that. Councillor D. Brooks is working in this trade. I mean, I have to trust his opinion and judgment on that. 100%, I would agree with amending that provision of bad debt. But as Councillor Dennis quite rightly said, we are picking at very fine things. If we drop that percentage, because from the 4.5%, because we're talking a rise of £24 based on a council tax of about £1,600, I believe is the I can't that figure, that pie chart is not in my head. So a 20 odd quid rise from us to deliver something that really does offer good value, in my opinion. I do get that we want it to be small 100%, but if we drop it small now, all we're doing is prolonging, unless we cut services, all we're going to be doing is delaying a higher rise in the future. So yeah, I absolutely appreciate we don't want to do this, but I haven't heard anybody yet come up with any ways they can save money. Not a single one that's going to get it anywhere close to that. We either stop delivering services, which this council has yet to decide what those possibilities are, or we raise the precept. Where's the answer? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Dan. Succinctly put. I know we've kept precepts low, and I've disagreed with every single low precept we've ever delivered. Because I believe you have to invest in communities and invest in people. I invest in my business. That's how I've moved it on, because I invest in it. A council is no different. We invest in our community. We're spending, as that Councillor Anderson says, public money, as he keeps bleating on about, then we're spending public money, and we are spending public money, but we're spending public money and we're delivering a service. And we need to look at what we're delivering. And we need to look at physical cost, not percentages, but what that physical cost is in pounds, shillings and pence, that we as a town council, not what East Lindsey, not what Lincolnshire, we're here today representing our community. I'm not here representing East Lindsey District Council. I'm here to represent Skegness Town Council. And that's what we're doing. I don't care what they do. What they do is what they have to do. But we need to get some vision, and we need to invest in our town, because the only way we're going to get out of this is certainly not by cutting services and not by cutting budgets. We can try and save money where we can. We've got to push this town forward. We've got to come out of this, and we've got to come out of it. That's why I'm working on planning policy to lengthen the season. Why I'm working with the bid board to bring more, to do more. Working with the Towns Fund. We've just had £750,000 advance money come for that. But that's nothing to do with Skegness Town Council. But we've got to go to our people and say, we've got to charge this, because this is what we're doing. And look what we've done in the last 7 or 8 years. 10 years, I've been 10 years as a councillor. I think when I came here, there was nothing going on. We've taken on so much. We've done so much. And we can't cut services, because we're coming into a time where where we need to make it better, not make it worse. And let's stop. We've got till December. We've got some big decisions and some big chats to do. This is just the first. This is the opening salvo, so to speak. I just want to try in my own little way to get the council's mindset. Stop talking about bike wheels and pumping bloody mower tyres. Let's look at the picture that we're looking at of what the staff are doing. what we're giving, what people are paying for, and let's get physical amounts of money, not percentages, and not percentages of what anybody else is paying. When somebody comes to you and saying, we deliver this, and you're part of that precept for a council B property is this amount of money last year, and it's going to be this amount of money this year. And that's what it's going to be in pounds, shillings, and pence, not percentages, not interested. You know, we've kept things too low for too long to buy votes. We've got to give people inspiration, and we've got to like running the business. You've got to invest in our kids, in our town, and we're not going to do that by picking at everything. You know, we just need to bite the bullet, tell people where they're at, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we're achieving, and this is what we're going to give you. We're going to keep the lights, we're going to keep the tower gardens looking great, we're going to keep the grass cutting so people will come here and spend their money. And that's what we need to do. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not having to go at any of how you see it and what you think about it. I'm just trying to get a different ethos of looking at the whole thing, not just keep picking at it. It just seems pointless to me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. I just think that the council taxpayer elected us to actually look at everything that we do in the budget, same as you would in your business, same as I do in my business. You don't keep having, I mean, I would like to know the subscriptions. Do we need LALC and NALC, or could we get rid of one of them? I would like to see what the software support is. £6,500. Do we actually use that amount of software support? I don't know, but I would like to know. Every business should be looking at the bottom line. It doesn't matter if you turn over £1,001 and you only make £1 profit. You've made £1 profit. Even if you turned over £2 and made £1 profit, you still made the £1 profit. But things that you can't just keep sticking with the same thing year after year without checking the prices. It's I mean, I would like the cemetery extension. We already know, because the clerk told us last year, the pavilion will be paid off before we need to extend the graveyard. And on this year, it's looking even more likely that we won't be needing graveyards pretty soon, because I believe with COVID, people are wanting to cremate people so that there's nothing, and I can see that as the only reason. But I don't think £60,000 in a cemetery extension fund that's sitting there when we won't need it for 30 years. And in 30 years, I might not be here. I might be in the graveyard. But what I'm saying is, why would you keep £60,000 in a fund that you're not going to use for 30 years? I just think that's obscene. It's like, you know, I'm going to put this money in the bank. It's not going to be touched for 30 years. Oh, but you could help our residents with that money right now. So, you know, I've got things like the cemetery extension, the bad debt money, because as Councillor Dan Kirk said, I know how much people sell those leases for. I know how much they sell them for. And it's probably 8 to 10 times that bad debt for one lease. That's what a leaseholder will sell his lease for, at least. So I know that if you was offering somebody a free lease to one of those kiosks, they would give you that £10,000 tomorrow. I could line 6 people up for you that I know of now. People coming to me every month, at least every year, asking me to sell the lease on my kiosk. And so, but I won't, obviously, because it's my livelihood. But I know what people pay for the leases, so I wouldn't have that in there. Also, the transfer into general reserves, I know we've got to boost our reserves, but I just think putting that in this year, you know, 30,000 straight in might be a bit too much. Maybe you could do half of that. What I would like to know is, how much do we have to bring down this precept to bring that down? I'm not saying we need to bring that right down to 4%, because the council tax did go up last year. Okay, it went up 4.75%, but I think 27% is too much. And like Councillor Dennis said, this is only the first salvo. So I'm not having to go at anybody. I'm just trying to do what's the best for our residents. And on that note, I'll go to Councillor Tony Ty.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've been looking at this and listening to what everybody's got to say, and I must admit it gets stuck in my throat to say it, but I do actually concur with Councillor Dennis. We've got to stop kicking the can down the street. We've got to invest. What we've done over the past 10 years, as far as I can remember, is put it up by around 4.5, 4.75, and now it's come back to roost. We've got to put it up. Now, I agree with you, Chair, that 27% is a great deal of money. That, along with Lincoln County Council, East Lindsey District Council, the Police Federation, when they put theirs on, will bring it to around about 56, 57% in total. So people will look at that when their bill drops through the door, they'll look at that and go, my God, look at this. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to be involved in that. But I do think we have got to look at it and invest. So that means that we're going to have to put it up to realistic figures. But that realistic figure, I don't think is anywhere near 27%. So all I'd ask is that we get the town clerk to go back with a sharpened pencil and revisit the budget and then come back to us. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wish we could just lose this mindset of percent and let's have some physical money figures on the table. Lose the percentage, the spin on the loose. Let's get to know what physical money people are going to have to pay for our part of the town council. And then we'll have a look at it. Certainly, Danny, totally agree with you about the churchyard. Totally agree with you about you've got to be ever so careful about saving money, because I can go into a firm today and somebody could come into my firm and they could probably save me 5, 6, 7, 800,000 pounds of what I'm spending. They could probably save that. And then ongoing, they could probably save another 200,000, 300,000 pounds the following year. And then you paid them a handsome bonus and they go down the road and then all your wheels fall off your trucks because they haven't been doing it properly. You know, anybody can go in and save money. It's the easiest thing in the world to save money. But you've got to look at the long game of if you save this, what's the repercussions of that? Because it's a price for a reason. You know, so I do think you be careful. But absolutely, it is only the first salvo, I agree. What I'm trying to talk to you about, guys, is let's get this mentality about what we're doing here and what we're giving to people. And, you know, you're right, Tony. I mean, you very, very, very rarely agree on much, but we certainly agree on this. And it's very true that, you know, we have kicked the can down the road because it's never been enough. You know, we've cut it and cut it and cut it, and they've pulled back on this, pulled back on that. The government wages have gone up, and that's been, you know, been stuck to us. The pensions have gone up. It's costing a lot of money. But all I want to do is all of us work together to try and get this right. But don't, for heaven's sake, don't ruin us. Don't leave us in 3 or 4 years' time down the street and we've kicked it down and kicked it down and kicked it down. Let's keep. You know, it's public money, and I can spend my money in my business because I'm the one that's taking the risk. As councillors, what you're doing is what we should be doing. We've got to look at things because it's other people's money I'm spending, not my money. If it's my money, I can take the risk and do whatever I like as a business person because the buck stops behind me. But I do think what I want to do as a council is get together and work together to make it, to show the value for money that we're doing. So look what we've done and all the stuff that we've took on. Please don't lose sight of that. That beautiful, you know, that beautiful hall we've got and that, you know, that fantastic room for disabled people that we've built and that cafe, the ambience and that cafe and the beautiful tower gardens and the things we've done. That's not, you know, people understand what we're doing. Yeah, there are people that are going to moan because people, you know, it rains, they blame a councillor. But we are Skegness town councillors, not East Lindsey district councillors, not Lincolnshire county councillors. We're Skegness town councillors. Let's focus on that. But I think it's been a great meeting so far, and it's been a meeting of minds, and we need to go away and come back with plans and talk it through, and I'm sure that we'll come to a budget that's going to be right for everyone. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just come in on a couple of points? Yeah. The £60,000, council can of course decide it doesn't want to you know, have that saving for a future cemetery because it can borrow at the time that's necessary. You can use that 60,000 to pay for one-off costs. So the one-off cost of COVID in this year, which we won't know exactly what it is until the end of the year, and you can use it to offset the future costs or future loss of income due to COVID next year. What you can't use that 60,000 for is ongoing revenue expenditure, because once you've spent it, it's gone and it's used up, and then you haven't got the income to keep those services going. So that's not delivering a balanced budget. So by all means, you can move it. You could move that 60,000 into the general reserve now, if you wanted to, and use that to offset those costs of COVID, lose that line off of there, and then that would remove the requirement to put the general reserve up next year, and it would give you, and it would counteract any future COVID, which we hope will be less next year, costs and loss of income. So that's a possibility. That's a decision council could make to move the discussion forward. In terms of the suggestion of, you know, leaving it to me to come back with a new budget which magically comes up with the figures that you want, I can't do that without you giving me direction. If you want to really reduce that figure down to 5%, then the only way you're going to do that is by cutting services. So that's going to mean no illuminations. You're going to stop cutting the grass. You're going to do, you know, not maintain tower gardens. It's going to be at that sort of level to get down to that sort of percentage. Those are the decisions you're going to have to make, because your reserves will quickly disappear and you'll have nothing. You'll reach a point where you've still got the costs of all those services and you've got no more reserves left to pay for it. And the external auditor, when they look at the budget, they will be quite happy to see reserves being used for one-off expenditure items where there's a problem. What they won't be happy with seeing is you funding future ongoing revenue expenditure from reserves, because that isn't a balanced budget. You can do it short term, but you can't do it long term. So if you want to get those figures down, I mean, let's you make a decision on the cemetery if that's what you want to do, and we can move those figures around and we can see what the impact is there. You could take a view on other reserve elements, because there are other reserve elements in the budget. They are areas that you potentially could remove, but bear in mind that you then don't have that money in the background if something goes wrong. It's like paying your insurance policy. You know, we can pay an insurer for an insurance policy, or you can put your money in reserves so you've got your own insurance policy. Currently, we've got quite a bit of money in our own reserves as our own insurance policy, so we don't have to pay somebody else for that. So those are the sorts of decisions you can take. But I can't go away and say and come back with a figure, because where do I take the expenditure from? You know, do I stop, you know, without your guidance as to which services you're prepared to look at reducing, I can't magically reduce those figures. As I say, you can reserves, you can do what I've suggested there, but you do need to give me guidance on where you want to look and how you want to go about that process.
Thank you, Steve. A quick question. We've got public property contingency, and then we've also got public property replacement. So we've got the reserves of 68,000 public property replacement, but then there's a contingency public property of 10,000. Should that not be, do we need both of those? You know, I mean, I don't know what they're for. Under the public property and grounds, down near the bottom, we've got contingency public property, and that's 10,000. But then in the actual reserves, we've got public property replacement of 68,000. You're still muted, Steve.
In the actual budget, that is a contribution into that reserve. Right. So that's an annual that's effectively paying ourselves our own insurance premium to put money in there so that we've got it for for future use. The reserve is a balance sheet item, which is a pot of money that sits there until council decides to use
Right.
it.
Yeah, thank you. We've got Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question to the clerk, if I could. What does a percent equal in the in monetary terms? So, you know, if you used to reduce it by 20%, what would that mean in monetary terms? Thank you.
Well, if you reduced it down to the 5% sort of level that we've had previously, you would need to find about £113,000 of savings. Bear in mind what I said at the beginning as well. We've lost income this year. We're likely to lose some income next year. I mean, car park being one of them. Obviously, the other one is in the graves and cemetery fees. So we've lost those income. If we lose them again next year, then that is effectively unfunded. So that money, the only other place that income can come from is the precept. So the choice is then for you is that how long is that going to last? Is it just a year? Is it 2 years? Are we going to see this for 5 years going forward? These are all the sorts of things that you need to weigh up in terms of how you manage the budget going forward. So yeah, they are quite, you know, it's quite a large sum. We've got to move. If you look at our actual expenditure over income, it's actually only it's increasing by around £70,000, but we're actually moving the total precept needed up by about £140,000, and that's because last year we funded £34,000 out of reserves. So you've got to make up that. You can't keep paying for things out of reserves. And the budget last year, I'll emphasize again, did predict an 8% increase this year anyway. So that was your starting point. This figure here was never going to be less than 8%. And we've now had COVID and other things on top, which is what it up to 2027, albeit you can do some things with reserves for those one-off costs.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Cunnington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't, what I'm saying now isn't to cause a debate, and it's not to question what's going on and what's gone on. But prior to myself becoming a councillor, the council had decided to build this new building and have this new cafe and take on all these bits from East Lindsey. And yes, we do need to look at what we've done and what we could do in the future and what our visions are as council. But picking up on something that Councillor Dennis said, and I'd just like a bit of clarity for the past and for the future regarding the property that we've taken on. The car park, yes, we can use to subsidise and we can make a profit with that. The way I feel at the minute, from what Councillor Dennis said, is I'm sitting here at the minute with a cup of hot water. I should have been expecting to sit here with a cup of coffee with cream in it and a biscuit because of the cafe. As far as I was aware, that we were going to use the income generated by the car park and the cafe to increase the council's income to save the council taxpayers paying out so much money, making it easier on them and making the council look better. If the council cannot make a profit from the cafe, can this ever contribute towards that income? Or was I misled somewhere prior to being a councillor as to what was going on? I can understand we can make a profit on the car park, which is down due to COVID at the present. But if we're never going to be able to get a profit from the cafe to help towards the cost of the new building, and that's what we were told prior to being councillors, As a council taxpayer, that's what I was told, that the business, the cafe building and everything would be paid for, contributed by the cafe and everything else. And it sounds like that's not the case now. So even I was misled. Thank you.
Chairman, I'll come back on that. I don't think it was any misleading at all. I think the cafe can't make a profit as such. It can contribute towards the council's costs. And for example, as part of the cafe the building business plan was to increase community engagement. So we've got things like, and at this time, really important. So,
fine, Steve, thank you. You've answered the question there. So it can make enough to contribute towards its own costs.
I want to finish the answer because it's important that I give the whole answer.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm happy with what you've given me so far, though. That's fine.
I understand, but I need council as a whole to understand the answer. I'm not giving a politician's yes/no answer. I'm giving you advice. Which is, we entered into this year not knowing that we were going to get struck with COVID. COVID has had the biggest impact on the hospitality sector. Cafe, restaurants, bars, all of those. We're still working within unbelievably restrictive conditions, trying to deliver not only a cafe that brings in some income, but also a service alongside that. At this moment in time, with the restrictions that we've got in place, it is incredibly difficult. And this is our startup year. We never anywhere was there any plan to make any surplus in year one. And I think what's going to happen, and why I'm reluctant to put figures in the lines going forward, is that I don't know what's going to happen next year. We could be living with these restrictions for another 6 to 12 months. If that's the case, then it is very, very difficult to deliver the sort of income that we might have expected. Now, it's never going to be, as Councillor Dennis I think alluded to earlier on, it's never going to be a big profit maker. It was always about subsidising council costs, using that income to offset costs. As a council, we can't make profit. It's not within our powers to do that. Otherwise, we would be in a situation where we'd need to pay corporation tax and those things. All we can do is set that any surplus that's in the cafe against other costs in the building and the services that we're providing, such as providing occasions for people, vulnerable people, other people to come into that building. We are definitely getting that during COVID at the moment. We're getting people coming in who are isolated, lonely. They're looking to the council facility as being a safe place to come. They're not necessarily spending very much money, but they want to come in, they want to be around near, but safely near other people. And we're already getting those sorts of people coming in terms of the sorts of engagement thing that we're looking at, say craft and writing and book clubs and those sorts of things, to try and get those people into a safe place and offer them a safe place. But that's a council service, part of the council business plan. The cafe will contribute towards the cost of that, but in this first year, it is incredibly difficult. Very, very difficult indeed. We don't know what the rules are going to be from one week to the next. Later on this agenda, you'll see we've put in place the risk assessments, and then whilst we are writing those, new rules come out and they will have to change again. So it is incredibly difficult to, and I'm sure those businesses that are involved in this, and councillors that are involved in this, will only be too aware how difficult that is. So that's why there's no figures on there, because at this moment in time, I'm not sure. I'm going to be coming back to council later on when we've got a quarter's figures and we'll go through this in a lot more detail.
No, that's fine, Steve. Thank you. Like I say, I wasn't looking at the figures in there. I was just looking at what Councillor Dennis said, just clearing things. So
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cunnington. Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That was very succinct. Thank you very much about that. £35,000 last time out of reserves, gone. It's not been put back. £60,000 for the graveyard, put that in there, gone. It could be gone. Never get back put in, never get put back again. We've got to balance the budget. That doesn't mean pinching money and putting it in just for a year's grace, because once that money's gone, it's gone and it won't come back. Move it around. If you're not happy where it is, put it in somewhere, but don't get rid of it, because once it's gone, it's gone.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. I'd just like to come back on what Steve Larner actually said. The cafe industry is in a bit of trouble this year. So if we can get the cafe on the Tower Gardens to be cost neutral for the next few years, I would be happy with that. It's as simple as that. I would expect a loss this year, and I would expect our cafe to have a loss this year. So I think he's doing a fantastic job. If he could come back next year and say, oh, it's cost neutral, I would be happy with that for the next few years, not just this year. Thank you. Councillor Dankirk.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few points, if I may. We're close to having one quarter of a year's worth of trade. I believe the clerk has confirmed that it's cost neutral. It is indeed cost neutral at the moment in regards to this current budget. So I'd like to request confirmation of that at the moment. I take Councillor Dennis's point on board 100% with regards to ensuring that there's enough funds to run the business. And I also appreciate Councillor Billy's point of view, Billy Brooks, with regards to this money is there, not kind of doing anything for 30 years kind of thing. And, just a rough basic economics, stuff doubles every 20 years, I think is right. So that £60,000 will only feel like £30,000 in 20 years, which in a grand scheme of things is not a huge amount. That's, extension for a cemetery is not going to happen on that sort of money. What I'd be comfortable to do is to meet halfway in the middle. We need to get the revenue, the actual income via the precept to be the right figure as to what has cost to deliver the services at the right level. I 100% agree with that. But we know that our predicted income has taken a massive hit through no fault of our own. If we had a rough idea as to what this figure was, based on council's forecasts from last year, I would be happy to offset that, because this is a once in a generation, fingers crossed, pandemic. The government, Boris Johnson has announced, has said once in a generation kind of event, and it is raining really hard. And if instead of offsetting our costs, if we were to offset our lost income with that reserve, I would be happy. I would also even be happy, instead of just doing it in that 1 year's hit, to spread that over what will be likely 2 years or more. I think this COVID is going to be with us. It's going to change our way of life, full stop, for decades, I believe. Hopefully not in a huge impact kind of way, but it's definitely going to be with us for some time. Let's not, if we do get some sort of vaccine, it's going to take many, many, many months for even people to want to even have it, let alone forcing people to inoculate and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be with us for ages. I'd be happy for the clerk to rejig some figures using that cemetery extension, because it's not going to be worth a huge amount in 30 years' time. We know that, but it could really be beneficial right now because of the event that we're currently undertaking. If the clerk has got a rough idea as to what lost income has been as a consequence, approximate, of course, based on our forecasts, then I think that we could do some rejigging. But I just want to stress, I'm 100% with Councillor Dennis, it must balance the books. If our expenditure, we need to match our expenditure with the preset rise. Simple as that. We need to do that. But if we can offset the loss of income, then that £24 per year increase because percentages are rubbish. So £24 increase. If we can get that to £15 increase or £20 increase, then I haven't got a live spreadsheet to start playing with the Clark's intense formulas, but I'd love to have a go and just to see what could possibly work. But I think that could be a way forward. What do colleagues think?
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. I would tend to agree on something like that. It's like the bad debts provision. I would sooner use.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would sooner use that £10,000 to buy a new car park machine, so that's actually earning us money with a new machine. Yeah, I mean the cemetery fund, as Councillor Dan Kirk has said. I would need confirmation from the clerk that he does still believe that it will be 30 years before we'd actually have to use that, by which time our loan of the pavilion would be paid off. If that was the case, then I would go along with Councillor Kirk saying, have a look at what we've lost, and probably use the bad debt provision for the car park machine. If you get somebody who's not willing to pay the rent, if you give me a bell, I'll bring somebody to your office in the next day or two with their rent and money to buy the lease. So the bad debt, I don't think we need that, unless of course we all get locked down and can't move again. But then again, kiosks can open. Okay, thank you. We've now got
Chairman, can I just come back on Councillor Kirk's question about the cafe?
Yeah.
I'm doubtful that we will break even this year. We started effectively mid-July. We had training. We had, surplus staff so that we could train people on the tills. We had obviously the initial costs of setup to get opened. We had a good August though. I mean, August, certainly the Eat Out to Help Out helped out. The fact that we're not paying the VAT has helped out. So August was good, and it actually showed the potential. I mean, we're still building customer. We're still building that customer, and that's going to take quite a while to do that. What we're seeing is that we're actually getting quite a lot of residential customers as opposed to tourists. We don't see the tourist trade too much. There were a few in August, but it was mainly sort of residents who were using the park and then coming in. September looks to be slowing down. We're having to make some changes. I don't want to go into the details now because I will bring that back as part of a later report. But I think it's going to be a real struggle this year. I think next year the aim will be to break even at cost neutral. That would be what we were looking for next year. But depending on the impact of COVID, that may or may not be a tough ask. I don't know how we're going to be when we hit the sort of main part of the season, and I guess every other business is in the same position regarding that. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I would have been very surprised if you would have been cost neutral, a new business, and straight away hit with COVID. I would have been very surprised if you said you hadn't made a loss. Thank you for that. Councillor Sid Dennis.
Thank you, Danny. In 1976, I bought a house on Wainfleet Road. In 1976, and I gave £13,000 for it. It was built in 1938, and it sold for £395. It's £200,000 today, that house. So in 30 years' time, God only knows what that acres of land is going to cost, and you've got £60,000 in reserve, but your farmland could be worth £500,000 an acre in 30 years' time, and you've got to build that in. You've got to look at the balance of where we're at, because you take it away now and 60,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in 30 years time it's not a lot of money. Because in 30 years' time, if inflation runs at 2-3%, but it could run at 20%, and who knows where it is, because it always goes, gentlemen, back to land. The price of land is where the value is, because there's never going to be any more. So you've got to be careful, because you've got to look at the big picture all the time. And I don't know if he took £60,000 at it and took it, like Dan said, and took it in the precept, what would that actually mean? What £60,000 in actual pounds per square inch would mean. So I think we've got to be aware of that. But as I say, it's a long way to go. And I think we've got a brilliant discussion tonight. I think it's been fantastic to hear everybody's views. And I think it's great. I think it's a really good start to getting where we need to be, to please and to have a case to put to our residents. Thank you.
Councillor, Councillor, do you want to come in, Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chairman, that I'm aware of the time is moving on. We've been, a good while on this subject, and there are other items on the agenda, including planning applications, which need to be commented on. So perhaps a swift resolution as to what we do next here, and come back with back to a future meeting, and then perhaps get on to the other agenda.
Yeah, I'll just bring in one last councillor, Councillor Ty, then we'll have to move on in some way or other.
Thank you, Chair. You've just brought me in after Steve, the clerk, had told you that I was just getting a bit worried about the time myself. We're 2¼ hours, and on standing orders, we're going to keep our meetings to 2 hours.
Right. Okay. We'll move on. So where we're going with this then, Steve? Did you get any kind of ballparkish type of thing that you can take your magic pencil back with?
Well, I think following what Councillor Dennis said, it might be useful to actually produce a spreadsheet so that you can see the cost of every element of the budget to people. I think that would give an idea of what we're spending and how much each individual item is costing everybody. So that would give you some perhaps a little bit more information there, and perhaps a couple of scenarios where we move the cemetery extension out, put that into general reserve and remove the other items as an option. So coming back with some options on that, but leaving the original. I don't think it was a consensus on anything. So leaving the original option on the table and then producing some further options that take those and perhaps the other reserves into account, but with a full explanation of what that means in terms of the council's risk strategy.
Okay, thank you. I'll just quickly bring Sid in and then Dan Kirk, because Sid's put his hand up. Councillor Dennis?
No, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
All right, mate. Councillor Dan Kirk, did you want to say anything quickly before we go?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we go with the clerk's recommendation. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Get a few options down, and then we can thrash it out a bit more at a future management committee meeting, perhaps. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Are you all? We're going to go with your scenario then, Steve, if you can. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on. Item 6. If you all remove your hands, then we can see who puts them back up. The Jolly Fisherman process report attached.
I suspect this might be a difficult one. Given the current COVID situation, that the Jolly Fisherman can't really go out anyway at the moment. I would suggest that this is perhaps deferred to the next future meeting.
I think that's a very good idea. Councillor Dick Edgington, would you like to propose that we defer this?
Yes, I'll propose that, Chairman. Thank you.
And Councillor, thank you, Dan Kirk. So it's been proposed and seconded that we defer this to a future meeting because of the COVID restrictions at the moment. We can't do anything with the Jolly anyway, really. Is that okay with you, Councillor Ty? I think you're the one who's got the costume at the moment. Are you all right to keep it for a bit longer?
Yes, that's not a problem. I was just concerned that it probably will want to be out over the Christmas period. If we do have a switch on, that has got to be sorted out yet. I don't know the situation there. So future meeting, as long as it's within the next 2 meetings.
Okay, is that all right, Steve?
Yes, I think we need to defer it. As I say, it's not urgent at this moment in time.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. That's carried. We'll defer that one for another meeting. Okay, we move on. Item 7, public facing risk assessment. Report and appendices attached.
These are the risk assessments that the council asked to be brought back each time. Unfortunately, because of the frequency of change, they're now out of date. So they are the position that was in place prior to the changes that government made last week. But they will need updating it again. And as you can see by the length of them, there's quite a bit of work that's involved.
I would propose that you bring those back to another meeting, Steve, because obviously it changes daily. There's going to be another announcement this week as well. So I would propose that if I can get a seconder, then we can move that one on to a councillor Den. Thank you very much. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8, Town Clerk miscellaneous report attached.
Mostly for noting, but there was one there which was regarding replacement bins, which is for approval because it would use reserves.
Do we have any comments on that? Or is it just? Did you say it was just for noting, Steve?
The first items are for noting, but there was one for approval, which was to use reserves to replace bins on King George V Wall, Beresford Field, St Clement's Cemetery, closed burial.
Okay, Councillor sorry.
Carry on.
Councillor Dunkirk.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely, we need to replace those bins. There was occasions where they were overflowing, no fault of residents, just purely because they weren't fit for purpose, especially on Beresford Fields. I think, I 100% support the clerk's recommendations to go ahead and purchase the bins. We've had that predefined insurance policy there for such occasion, and we can't cut down on that service 100%.
Thank you. Is that a proposal, Councillor Kirk?
It was, yes. Chairman,
thank you. Councillor Sid Dennis.
I'll second that, Chairman. Thank you.
We've had it proposed and seconded. Councillor Adrian Finlay, if you've got something to add to the debate, it's been proposed and seconded that we go with it.
No, the only thing I was going to add was that I was quite impressed with it because George Walk is getting in a bit of a state. It does need the bins, both poo bins and rubbish bins. I go down there just about every night and it's in desperate need of new bins. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 9, securing sites options paper, confidential options appraisal attached.
Chairman, again, given that this is likely to be a lengthy debate and it also has implications for the budget, I would suggest that it's moved to the next meeting, but perhaps before the budget discussions, so that it can inform that. With planning coming up as well, there are 4 items. I think it's more, I would recommend that council need to get to them, or committee needs to get to them rather than this one, which could be deferred.
Okay. Do we have someone to propose that we defer it? Councillor Trevor Burnham.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll propose it.
Okay. Councillor Dennis.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we've had it proposed that we're going to defer this item because it's a lengthy one that will be budget affected. So we need to really see what the budget situation is first. All in favour?
Before you go ahead with that, would this current item on the agenda, would it need to go to closed session just due to the fact of we know what it's about, we know what's going on, but do we want everybody listening on the internet as to what's going on due to the vulnerability? I don't want to say any more, but I think closed session for that one when it does come back. Thank you.
Okay, but we're deferring it now. It's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's carried. Move on to the. My papers have only got up to item 9. Steve. What have we got?
Chairman,
Councillor
I need to
Eddington?
leave the, excuse me, I need to leave the meeting now, Chairman, because it's planning and a conflict of interest there, so to speak. Those of us on the ELDC Planning Committee.
Was that the last item, Steve?
Yes.
Planning is the last item.
All right, yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Eddington.
That's okay.
Thank you for your time and forbearance tonight.
That's the same for me, Chair.
Yeah.
Good night, one and all.
Good night.
Can I just say you're looking well, sir?
And for me as
Yeah, that's the same for me as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you,
See you later,
feeling
Sue.
well?
Thank you.
Looking well, mate.
I'm feeling very, very well. Yes, 2 weeks today I had the operation, so I'm feeling
Not
really
enough.
well. Thank you.
Oh,
You know what I mean? It's really. I'm really feeling very good. Absolutely, it's frightening, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, very good, marvelous. And thank you, everybody who's commented. I much appreciate all your comments. It's been really nice. But just be careful what you're praying for. See you later. Have a good evening. Good night.
Have you got enough? Because I'm about to leave as well.
I'll be leaving the meeting as well, Chair. Thank you.
We will be then in Cora, unfortunately.
Do you want me to stay on then?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Not me, Steve.
7. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can stay on. That
Yeah,
would-
no worries. I'm just going to get a drink.
Well, hurry up
I'm not on planning, am I?
Can
Chair.
you take mine and fill mine up?
Excuse me, Chair.
don't need to be on planning to sit here because it's been delegated through.
Yeah.
Councillor Cunnington?
I think
was
he wishes me
shouting.
to remove him, I think.
Oh, right.
He's on planning. That's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's okay.
Okay. Am I still doing this, or is Councillor Ty taking over?
Normally it would be you, but if you haven't got the papers in front of you,
I've got it now. Yeah,
got it now. Right.
I've got the planning one. Yeah.
Then
Okay,
it would only be you to continue.
Right, I'll carry on then, guys and girls. Item 10, planning applications for consideration. Item 10.1, planning permission, change of use of land to form an extension to the existing domestic curtilage, including the raising of the land levels, works already completed at 5 Acres Crescent, Skegness, number 1.
I'm having trouble bringing my plans up now.
Now, Councillor Ty. There's no.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we've got it now, Steve. Well, I have anyway.
Right. 10.1. That's 10.1.
Has there been any objections to it at the moment, Steve?
And not at the moment. The works have already been completed.
So I would imagine if somebody was going to object, they would have done so before. Yeah. Any other comments, councillors?
I personally just hate it when plans are already completed and then they come for planning. To me, it's very difficult, very, very difficult.
I do agree, but unfortunately, that is the planning law.
Yeah.
I'll bring the speakers in. Councillor Jimmy Brooks. No, you had it raised from before. Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you, Chairman. I tend to just not take that into relevance. If this planning application was put in front of us right now, without any prejudice as to whether it's complete or not, does it fulfil the planning grounds? So I believe the development is in keeping. It's got mitigation for the flood risk. The other consultees have not raised any concerns. I don't personally see it as a problem. So for that reason, I would propose. I'd propose we.
I hope he's having a Bradley Walsh moment. Don't forget you're on YouTube.
I know. I propose that we adopt it. We approve the application.
Oh dear. I'll second that.
We've got a second. We've got a proposer and a seconder. All in favour, please show. Okay, that's carried, I think. Okay, so please take your hands down now. I don't know what Dan was laughing at. Maybe somebody was doing something for him. Item 10.2. Planning permission extension and alterations to the existing building to provide 3 additional first and second floor flats and alterations to the existing vehicular and pedestrian access.
Chairman, this has already been before before council, before the planning committee before, and the planning committee made an objection against it based on the overbearing nature, the overdevelopment of the site, the lack of good parking facilities, and the sort of general impact that it would have on the area. There are both objectors and supporters for this. The objectors seem to be more the immediate neighbours, and the supporters seem to be other people who one of the objectors has called friends of the applicant. The changes that have been made to the application are that frosted glass has been put into the area of windows which overlooks the neighbouring garden, but the neighbour has raised concerns that these are still opening windows and therefore would still afford a view directly over there and into their garden property. And the other changes in relation to the parking, where additional parking spaces have been proposed, and you can see the outline of those here. Now, this council actually now owns this unadopted road. It's part of the green space and play area that's next door. This unadopted road provides access to both the green space, but also to Anglian Water's facility, which needs 24/7, 365 days a year access. There isn't an awful lot that I think that changes the previous council position.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the plans on East Lindsey, and like you've just alluded to, all the objectors are the people that live there, that have got to live with that on their doorstep. All the supporters, well, if I supported it, it wouldn't matter to me, because I'm never, I'm not going to have to live and look out my window and see it. So I don't like it when supporters don't live there. Now, if all the neighbours had supported it, I would have a different view on it. But I'll hand it over to councillors. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just looking at it, I'm looking at the map on Google Map. How I see it, yeah, all the residents around it are objecting to it. It's also near the children's play area, so it's going to increase possible traffic in that area. So it could be a danger to the children. So I recommend we go for refusal. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Trevor Burnham.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Jimmy Brooks. Yeah, let's just go for the refusal. I'll second it.
So I've got proposed and any further comments? I've got proposed and seconded that we go for refusal. No other comments, and all in favour?
Chairman, is that on the same grounds as previously?
Yes,
I think so. I think so, Steve, because I don't think they've changed that much.
No.
Like I say, opening windows, but we've frosted them. All right, so I can sit there with them open all day and look out them there. The unadopted road, yes, they put car parking spaces in there on a road which is next to our play area where there could be children running up and down there. Now you're putting more traffic down. So I think the same sort of things as last time, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chair. Totally agree.
All in favour? Is that carried? Let me have a look. You was voting as well, was you, Councillor Tykes? You'd not put your hand
Yes,
up.
I've got it up. Well, I can't because you've blotted it out.
All right, okay. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think that's carried, Steve.
That's carried, yeah.
Thank you. Item 10.3. Planning permission, rear extension to existing bungalow to provide additional bedroom and kitchen lounge area on site of a part of an existing dwelling which is to be demolished. 49 Wainfleet Road. Pardon me.
Wrong one. Sorry, I'm having mouse trouble at the moment.
Oh dear.
You need some poison.
Is there any objections to this one, Steve?
No, not at this moment anyway.
No, it looks a huge extension, don't it? It's about twice the size of the bungalow.
That shows it in context.
Yeah.
Councillor Dunkirk.
Thank you, Chairman. The extension is predominantly behind the main facing property, so it doesn't seem to impact the general street scene, in my opinion.
No.
There are quite a few large properties, as in tall, within Wainfleet Road and things like that. So, in my opinion, I believe it's still in keeping with the variety of different bits of architecture for sure. So on those grounds, I'd happily accept and propose that we support the application.
Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, totally agree with Councillor Dunkirk. Yeah, I think, to be honest, it'll be fine in that area. I can't really see it cause any issues, so I'd say.
Okay. It's been proposed and seconded. All in favour that we support the application, please show. Yep, that's carried, Steve. Thank you. Item 10.4. Planning permission, extension to existing house to provide an attached annex on the site of an existing store which is to be demolished. 45 Lumley Crescent. Councillor Dunkirk.
Apologies, Chairman. My hand was still raised from previous. I'm still awaiting my judgment. I think I'll wait for other people.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Pete Barry.
Is there any objections from any residents or anything like that?
Not at this moment in time.
I know the area, and to me, I think it'd be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dankirk.
Thank you. I do take point that lots of people always look at whether there's objections by residents, but we are the authority that's assisting in this consultation, essentially. So just a point to make councillors aware and take note of that. With regards to this application, there are considerably large properties in the area. I think it's going to personally aid the it'd be useful for the family to therefore not have to move if they can also you know what I'm saying with that. The it's in keeping, I believe, as well with the similarly large properties, and I don't see that it detracting from the overall street scene immediately. So I propose that we support the application.
Councillor
I
Jimmy
second that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will second that. And I can see at the side there is a massive house that's got an extension or conservatories next to it. This isn't going to have any impact on them. So yeah, I'm happy to second it.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded then. All in favour, please show. Yeah, that's carried then, Steve. Thank you very much. I think that brings the meeting to a close.
It does.
Thank you everyone for your attendance and putting up with me having to chair it.
Apologies for
Great
my
job.
my laughing fit. That wasn't me that burped.